Hello, and thank you all very much for joining us on this Film Hub NI podcast, focusing on accessibility for audiences in online screening. This series of podcasts are supporting independent exhibitors across the UK and Ireland to engage positively with online opportunities and what challenges can be met, and also what the future of a hybrid world might mean.
Yes, as Hugh says, this podcast or this series of podcasts are focused on supporting exhibitors when they're looking at online screenings and online events, everything from audience development to programming to evaluation. You can listen to them standalone or listen to them in the series. We'd also like to thank our funders, Northern Ireland Screen, who have supported us with this programme through the Department for Communities, and they certainly see the value in upskilling exhibitors.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks for mentioning the funders. I always forget that too. So we're delighted to be joined all the way from Herefordshire by Toki Allison, who is the Film Audience Network Access Officer. That's quite a title you have there, Toki.
Yes.
And you're based at Film Hub Wales. So are you doing all right? Hello, Toki. Nice to see you.
Hello. Yeah, I'm doing all right, thanks. I'm very
Good.
fortunate to be, in a rural location where I can amble around in the fields at lunchtime and get my dose of vitamin D. So
Yeah, get your head, what we'd say, get your head showered a bit.
yeah.
Yeah, good. Well, look, thanks very much for joining us today. We wanted to just start, maybe it might be useful for maybe people who aren't intimately involved in the FAN, just to sort of hear what your role is within the Film Audience Network.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the access officer, but I guess the remit was set quite broad from the start, really, and that's really looking at kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how we can support our audiences really to feel like they're welcome in independent cinema spaces. So that's about working with all of the film hubs across the UK and with all of the members as well to support them with their inclusive practice. And that might be from running autism or dementia friendly screenings, or it might be from looking at how they can improve the culture of their organisation to welcome more people of colour. It might be around deaf, disabled, neurodiversity access, across the range of anybody who might feel marginalised essentially by sort of standard cinema experiences. And we do that through a variety of ways. So we've got a website called inclusivecinema.org that has lots of resources and case studies and useful bits and information. We also do kind of like consultancy, I guess, and chat with members if they want to ring me up or message me, then they're welcome to do so. My contacts are out in the world. And then we do some advocacy work as well. So that's around like talking to industry at large and sort of representing the Film Audience Network, representing the membership, and also representing indie cinema, and the kind of importance of inclusion to anybody who'll listen, frankly.
You talked a bit there about your work with audiences in cinema spaces. Obviously, there's been a bit of a change over the last while. So we were wondering what have been the main challenges for access and diversity during the pandemic for audiences?
I did have a bit of a chat with a group of people who live with dementia, and also a chat with an organisation who represent people with autism. And there's a real appetite for people to be back in the cinemas, actually, and for people to sort of have that slice of normal life and those kind of experiences that aren't just all about your condition, but are just part of like interacting with culture in the world and having a nice time and forgetting your worries. And I think a lot of that's been taken away for everybody, but specifically for people with neurodiversity. I think a lot of that's been quite challenging, that they haven't been able to have those parts of their routine that they were really enjoying before. And so that's been sort of tricky, because I think there were lost connections then, and then it's about how do you kind of work with those audiences to bring them back. And when you're working on limited capacity and when you want to provide a relaxed environment and say to everybody, yes, you can walk around, you can't really do that with COVID rules. So it's like, how do we find a different way to sort of bring people into a space? How do we inform people about the changes in the rules and make that still welcoming? So I think that's been really, really tough, actually, for a lot of people. I suppose from the point of view of like representation as well, obviously we've had some good titles come out, things like Sound of Metal and Mogul Mowgli. I mean, Riz Ahmed is obviously a hero, but there's been some really great titles that have come out around sort of representation of, you know, different lives, I suppose. But I also worry that without those big screen theatrical experiences, how much are those stories getting seen, and are they sort of getting a bit buried by going straight to virtual? There's a few areas, I suppose, where I feel like audiences are probably not getting the experience they could be. But that said, you know, it's still been great to at least we've all had some sort of cinema, even if it's not been in the cinema, you know.
Well, it's interesting with a title like Riz Ahmed film Sound of is it Sound of Metal? Yeah, you know, something like that is a really interesting one, because it has come out, it has made a bit of an impact. But you think about seeing that in a screen with a sound system that would reflect a lot of the issues in the, you know. It would be a very different experience from. I mean, I watched it on this screen. In fact, you know, it's a tiny little sort of thing, and I think that there are difficulties around that. However, having said that, I mean, I think a lot of the people within the independent cinema movement and the Film Audience Network are aware that there are opportunities for access for some groups that might not have been there in the first. Have you discovered those where new audiences are engaging with indie cinema, or?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of noise earlier on in the first lockdown, I suppose, around like, oh, everything's accessible now and everybody can get to things, and that was not entirely true, but it was to a degree a lot better for people who are like maybe rurally isolated or have caring responsibilities, or who physically can't like leave the house to go to the cinema. There was greater access to certainly things like film Q&As and discussions and some of that more participatory stuff around cinema, which was really exciting to see. And I feel like there were some real leaders who were kind of on the front foot with captioning and providing accessible sort of screenings and formats and ways of work, people who are using like pay-as-you-go systems for, you know, booking their films in their film festivals, some really sort of great ways of being more accessible for audiences. But also I did worry that at times it might have got a bit overblown, that like everything was super accessible now, and not everybody was providing actually that level of experience. Not everybody was really thinking about it. And also recognizing that seeing a film and being able to like log on to systems like Zoom and work out how to function, you know, your Vimeo profiles and, you know, all of that sort of stuff requires a certain level of understanding of technology, and not everybody is that comfortable with it, and some people need support to access things. And I think the other thing as well that was really sort of not spotted, I guess, by everybody early on was issues around data poverty and digital poverty as well, and that you know, not everybody has unlimited data. Some people don't even have very good internet connections. So a lot of that stuff, I think, really kind of like kept audiences outside of things where maybe they would have been able to come along to stuff. So I think, but in a sense, the online world just mirrors the physical world, doesn't it? You know, we've still got the same issues, but it's just finding other ways to handle them. But there have been some really interesting things done. And I think there's been a lot of, you know, it's been really nice to see people stating their pronouns more, you know, and putting that information out. There's been more people thinking about, I guess, talking, you know, explaining what things look like visually for people with sight loss. And so there's definitely been sort of like improvements along the way where there's kind of more of an idea in the kind of common consciousness, I suppose, about like how to be more thoughtful to people with different needs.
Yeah, and I think it's also that sort of learning curve for people. You know, I was involved with the This Way Up conference, and you know, that sort of, you know, describing who you were and what you looked like at the start was quite interesting. And again, you know, that's also an issue that also has, you know, things arise from it and issues arise from it. You know, do I need to identify myself and not label myself as a, you know, as a particular person before anybody understands who I am, you know, or what I'm saying and things. So I think that each opportunity brings more questions, and, you know, and the opportunity for disabled audiences. But then, you know, as you say about data poverty, it is, Yeah, I mean, I think there's a sort of what's the word, like a temptation to go, well, online will solve all our problems.
Yeah.
But actually, it just brings maybe slightly different problems along the line as well. So
Yeah, I think all of the things that still impact our physical lives are there online, you know what I mean? And it's about cultural access, who feels welcome, you know, can people afford this? Do they even have like the computer or the phone to access it? So, you know, some organizations have done amazing things. They've been like buying data for people to make sure that they can access their stuff. You know, they've been doing pay what you can, so you can just join things for free if you don't have the money. And I think all of that stuff has really helped in some ways to democratize access, which has been really lovely.
just one last question for me on this, just before Sarah asks some more technical questions. I think, you know, going forward, is it something that we're going to have to create new policies and new strategies for in terms of accessibility?
Yeah, I think so, to be honest. I mean, I feel like the legislation in the UK isn't good enough as it is. So there isn't really a, like, you know, legal requirement in other than the kind of reasonable adjustments, which is sort of referenced in the Equality Act. There isn't actually sort of an absolute dead requirement for people to provide access versions on things, or so it's a bit kind of, it's sort of up for argument in some contexts, which is a problem. And I feel like actually online is just another world, isn't it, of like freedom for people just to do really great stuff, but also do stuff really badly as well. It's so yeah, I do think we need more policies. And I think that, you know, the question about safeguarding people in an online space as well, because you can police, for want of a better word, the kind of environment that is created physically. But I think there's often, you know, just a bit of a free-for-all online, isn't it? As long as you've got a Zoom link, you can just kind of access things. There's a way people speak in online as well, which I think they wouldn't do in person. And we've seen that with the ways, you know, social media can operate and stuff as well. So I think being really clear about having like safe space codes, having kind of real conversations to set the context for how people can speak to each other, and also sort of setting a tone for meetings and for, you know, discussions and group activities as well is really important, so that people sort of know what's expected of them, and that, you know, they're kind of in a space where they can be safe and speak freely and not be like kind of trolled by somebody for all of that stuff. I think Moira's doing some really good work, who's the young audiences lead for at Film London, is doing some really good work around like putting together a sort of safeguarding policy for online experiences, and that'll obviously look at people who are vulnerable, but also just anybody, and how they, you know, how they operate, and how exhibitors can run really kind of thoughtful, safe events for their audiences as well. So that'll be useful.
Everyone's had to learn a lot of stuff very quickly over the last while. And I just wanted to ask a more technical question. I know we've discussed in a previous podcast different platforms that are available for exhibitors, and I was wondering what your analysis of all these different platforms and the kind of different functions that they all kind of offer in terms of captions and audio descriptions and all that. I know there's a document which we can share and link on the website here with this podcast, which has a kind of overview of all of that.
So if you can link to the document for sure. That probably, I'm not sure how up to date it is because it's crowdsourced, so I think a lot of people have like thrown information in there, so it might need a bit of a rescan. I get kind of like mixed opinions from different people as well, and I'm not, if I'm honest, fully on top of every single kind of platform and what they're delivering, because there's just so many and there's a lot going on. But it does look like currently the key platforms like the key film festival platforms. So you've got Shift 72, Eventive, Cinesen and Vimeo, Vimeo TT, which has been used a lot. They all have provision for uploading like SRT files, some for VTT files as well, I think. So you can have your kind of captions of hard of hearing, as long as they've obviously been created. There are some really great providers. Obviously there's loads out there. We don't endorse anyone specifically, but I would say I've worked quite closely with like Matchbox Cineclub and Day for Night, and they are both kind of really solid grassroots organisations who will deliver sort of access versions affordably for people, and just have a really good kind of access brain on, I suppose, where they really think about access across all fronts. So those are kind of the platforms I think which have all got those services on offer at the moment, and then there will be others out there, but I just not across everything.
Yeah, of course.
In terms of discussions, I think YouTube and Zoom are pretty good at having closed caption writers. You can actually have typists that can write directly into the meetings. Whereas I don't know how good Facebook is at that. I don't know whether you need to upload those later on, or maybe beam a live stream through to Facebook from another platform to be able to get that to work. And I would always advocate for like live captions over auto captions. I have had a bit of a play around with like things like Otter, which is a kind of transcription app that will also create live notes and captions. We've done a bit of work with that, but it can be a bit twitchy, and obviously auto captions are never as good as a human because they can't understand context, they don't recognize like names always, or you know, things like that. So but obviously it just comes down to budget a lot of the time, and I know a lot of people can't afford like to pay a typist to attend or a note taker to attend every sort of Q&A that they're running. So it's about, you know, a balance. But I always feel like that's the kind of thing you could just put, you know, ideally if people are thinking about putting access just directly into a budget line when they're coming up with an event, rather than thinking about it afterwards and then trying to find money that isn't there. It's like if it's part of that original planning, then you don't feel like you've been bitten by it in that sense, if that makes if you know what I mean.
I just want to pick up on a point that you made there about certain titles, if they actually have the accessible function, if they have caption built in, because we've had several questions about how do exhibitors, film clubs make sure that everything they do is captioned or accessible, but the reality is that not every title available actually has that function.
Normally, and there's all very like changeable, there's not a real general rule unfortunately, but normally the bigger studios will provide like caption files, the bigger distributors. So that's your, you know, your kind of like whatever Paramounts, and not, I would say Studio Canal not, so they're probably the first of the more indie ones, and the smallers that don't, most of the smaller distributors won't unless they're being funded to deliver that. So if you get a BFI film fund or a BFI audience fund, so if you get a production fund or a distribution or exhibition fund, then you should be providing formats as part of your funding agreement to do that. And any BFI distribution new releases, not archive but newer contemporary titles, should have access versions on as well. So it is a bit like a patchwork of what's out there, what's provided. Obviously the ideal would be that producers on a production would be responsible for doing this, and it would be part of their deliverables along with the final edit that they deliver the access versions. And I also think there's an argument, you know, quite a strong argument to say, like, why would you not want control of that? As like a filmmaker and as a creator, why would you not want the descriptive subtitles, or, you know, the or the audio description to have your voice in it, to have the way that you would want your film to be heard or seen? I find that quite interesting, that there's sort of like the hands-off approach in a sense, and then it's sort of often left to distribution to do that piece of work, which they don't always have, you know, money for as well. And then the worst case scenario is it comes to exhibition, which happens quite a lot of the time. And then you've got an issue of like people in exhibition all creating separate, you know, caption, so subtitle files, which is a waste of resources as much as anything else.
There seems to be a lot of doubling up going on, and
so I'm working with a small group of people at the moment, and we're trying to sort of find a way to resolve that, whether there's like a catalogue or a listing service or something we could do. So that's still a bit of a work in progress, but hopefully there'll be somewhere to go to in future where you can sort of check if versions already exist and where to get them from, so that you're not kind of doing that work twice, really, because it's just really silly. It doesn't feel like it should be exhibition's responsibility, is my feeling, but you know, I'm a bit biased, so I'm going to say that, aren't I?
But it really is a challenge for smaller exhibitors who want to kind of engage with indie cinema, and you know, and you know, sort of smaller titles and things like that.
Absolutely.
That can really be a challenge.
I mean, what I would say is, like, there are I would say LGBT film festivals are often really great at doing this work, and really great at thinking intersectionally about access and kind of an inclusion across the board, really. And I think Leeds Queer Film Festival, probably the first in the UK to bring over, for instance, like the pay-as-you-go scheme over here, and then Squiff picked that up, the Scottish Queer International Film Festival as well. And I know they've done a lot of work around captioning all of their, you know, having subtitles on all of their all of their films basically, and a lot of those are like new titles that haven't had a release. So, and they have a really great activist network of people who will do some of that work, you know, for a reasonable amount, you know, for a reasonable fee rather than sort of crazy money. So I think because they have that will and they've got that kind of energy and culture, they can galvanize a group of people to do that. Whereas you maybe don't get that so easily when you're looking at like venues or sort of one-off events and things like that. So
just to pick up, just with you, you know, with your fan hat on, just have you got any advice for, say, you know, community exhibitors or small film societies who are going to dabble in online screening? You know, what they should think about, areas they should think about in terms of accessibility and diversity? Big question, sorry, but
it is a big question. I think it's the same, from my point of view, it's the same model as you would use for a larger venue, really, and it's about consultation with people, you know, because access needs are variable and very different, and some people's needs will conflict with somebody else's needs as well, you know. You won't always be able to please everybody, and you sort of have to take that on the chin before you start, and you sort of have to be ready for to not get it right for quite a long time as well, and just be like, okay, we're learning, we're changing, we'll keep developing. So I think it's a lot of it is just about good conversations with people in your community, whether there's like a kind of group that you can connect with. There's like a lot of access groups all over the place, you know, different autism groups or different sort of deaf groups as well, deaf clubs, people that you can connect with that will, you know, offer them will offer you some insight, basically, bring them along to screenings, you know, and give them a chance to feedback on what the experience is, what they would like to see, what changes could be made. So that can be more on a kind of environmental level, like looking at, you know, how is the building to get into, you know, what's the setup like? Do we need to have a break here? You know, can we have an intermission? That sort of stuff. But yeah, in terms of like being able to offer things, I think there are formats out there for a lot of titles. So it's just being aware of what's available. Obviously, a lot of like Blu-rays and DVDs, if people are screening in that way in a kind of community environment, often they will have those formats, which is really great. So, you know, you can stick those on and that's like one job done, isn't it, really? Which is always a good start. And I think there are, I guess it's another good thing about community spaces actually is that they can be a lot more friendly, depending obviously how old the buildings are and things like that, but they can often be more kind of wheelchair friendly as well, because you've got flexibility to sort of move seating around and things like that. Whereas often with, you know, your bigger cinema spaces, it's just like, you've just got to sit at the front like this, you know, with your right up against the screen and get neck ache, or you get shunted off to somewhere, you don't get that kind of choice. And I think often as well, community cinema attitudes can be nicer in a way. Like, it's not just about the churn of getting people in and out of a cinema, it's about like, how do we create a really like lovely environment for people, you know, get to know all of your members, you know, of your cinema well, and kind of find out what they need and what they want. So I just feel like a part of the stuff that might challenge community cinemas might be things around like the cost and the technology, but the stuff that could be really good for community cinemas, they've already got quite strong relationships a lot of the time with their audiences. So they've already got those kind of relationships to tap into and have a conversation. But were you thinking more about online as well? Because I realise I've been talking more about physical.
Well, no, well, yeah, but I think your point is very valid about approaching things. You know, how you would approach the physical screening is very much how you should approach an online screening. You know, thinking about welcome, thinking about atmosphere, thinking about creating a space, I suppose, because there is a bit of fluidity and flexibility around things like Zoom and how you know, who chairs it, or how you how you monitor that sort of thing, and also the chat rooms and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I think with online as well. Sorry. Like, go on. Sorry. You're going to say something? No, I was just going to say with like, I think there's...
You go,
it's all right, I've got a bit of a delay, I think, so I'm kind of talking over you. But yeah, I think with Zoom, it always works better when there's like good Zoom manners, doesn't it? So, you know, when people raise a hand, or, you know, there's like a bit of a process, or like you go around the room and give everybody a chance to respond to something. So in a way that can actually be really helpful for access, because it's sort of, stops the loudest people shouting over everyone else, and it, you know, some of those things that can be a bit difficult when you're in a physical space can sort of be overcome. So I guess it's playing to the strengths of the platform as well as much as possible, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly in terms of programming as well online. I know we said at the start of this that there were certain titles that have been released over the last while that really should have been seen in a cinema release with a bit wider. But do you feel that there are opportunities for accessible programming, like new voices and new faces? And what are your thoughts on that?
I think so. I mean, my feeling is always that just like the more representation, the better, frankly. It makes our film programs more exciting, more voices. I mean, what's the point of cinema if it's not to see into different lives and experience different worlds from, you know, from the screen and from the comfort of a chair? It's like that's the whole point, isn't it? Is it transforms your understanding of the world around you, because there are different stories and voices. So from my point of view, that's the whole point, and it extends through to access, and it extends through to the physical stuff and the, you know, and the budgets and the bits you have to do to make that happen. But the truth is, it's about it's about creative diversity and sort of understanding the value of difference, and all of that bit, really. So yeah, I always just find it exciting, and I think it's actually less risky. I think a lot of people talk about it being more risky to have like different types of programming, but the truth is that, you know, in a sense, it's really less risky because you're not having a homogenous offer. You're talking to lots of different kinds of people, and you're broadening the reach.
I was just going to say that one of the opportunities, I suppose, is reaching more people as well outside your specific organization. If you're an indie cinema doing stuff online, there are opportunities to connect with people further afield and maybe other organizations that might not have been possible before. There's a lot of work goes into audience development, getting audiences into cinemas in real life. And I guess that could be something that could roll into that and more visibility for your organization.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's exactly. It's reputation as well, isn't it? You know, and sort of.
One of the things I was going to say was about, you know, something like the QFT player has been quite interesting because they've been able to show, I mean, they always had a very diverse program anyway, of course, but they've been able to show shorts and you know, and use the online as a third screen, because there is a lot of pressure on independent venues to, you know, there is a churn of films coming on and on and on, and you have to make space for them and stuff like that. So creating space in, say, a 2-screen cinema or a 3-screen cinema can be difficult. And what the online presence gives you is an opportunity to use your brand and your kind of heritage to get eyeballs on interesting stuff. And certainly exactly. Michael Staley screened some very interesting shorts from, you know, kind of from down south that was around issues of race and diversity within Irish society and things like that. So I mean, my final question, sorry, it's taken a bit of a long way around to this, but, you know, that there are benefits from online. Yes, we talked about the challenges and the drawbacks and things like that. As we go back into in real life, how do you think we're going to use online as a tool to develop audiences, diverse audiences, and develop accessibility? Do you think that we can do that?
Yes, yeah, I do think we can do that. I mean, I guess most of the creators I've spoken to now have said that they want to, you know, they want to do hybrid going forward. They don't want to lose their online audiences, you know, and they know that they've caught new people from across the country, whereas before they might have been really sort of geographically reliant on their local communities. So, and also I think it goes back to that like old argument, isn't it, where you've got like 2 cinemas opening up in close proximity to each other, and it's like, oh, you know, there's competition and you're going to steal my audiences, but what actually happens is just more people go to the cinema more often because you've created a culture of cinema. And I think it works the same in the online physical space, where actually you just end up with more kind of, you know, a stronger cinema culture in a sense of people being, and I know that's kind of maybe a, you know, dreamy, optimistic way to look at things, but actually that is kind of proven in the way that people behave a lot of the time. And so for sure, I think brand recognition is really valuable. For sure, I think reaching out to people and saying, you know, we've got this online offer for you if you can't make it in to see us, and, you know, we still want to share our experience. It's not all behind closed doors, and it's only for the people that can afford to get here or have time to get here. All of that sort of stuff is really valuable. I think in terms of access, I feel like there's a risk that there will be kind of a bit of a ghettoization of accessibility into online, away from, like, there's a risk that things could go that way, or they could go the other way, which is the way obviously we'd all love them to go, which is that, like, you know, like having captions is the norm, having audio description on a lot of titles is the norm. As long as the files are there, then we can screen them. And you get more physical provision in cinemas. But I do worry sometimes that there'll be this, like, oh, if you've got access needs, you can just get it online, and then that won't help the growth of our kind of cinema spaces to be more inclusive in a physical sense. So there's probably a few things just to be aware of, I suppose, as we start to go back into physical spaces again. It's always just about talking to audiences, and it's always just about kind of working out based on real evidence and what people with lived experience have to say, what will work. There's been some organisations as well now, like some members within FAN, who are trying out different methods of relaxed screenings in a hybrid way, so having like an online and a physical screening, and what will that look like. And we're looking at a potential project in the future which will look at different models and then feed those insights back into the membership again, so people know kind of what direction to take in those areas too, so like what works and what doesn't. So I think that will all be really exciting. I think we just need to have really good messaging, really good messaging about cinemas being safe, like about the importance of community, about due care, that is being taken. All of those comms are really important at the moment.
I think that's the important thing, isn't it? It's the awareness of taking it step by step and ensuring that because decisions have been made very quickly over the last year, and organizations have pivoted very fast, and perhaps it's putting in place stepping stones to think about how that best can work for all audiences, and improve inclusivity and not lose the gains that we've made through your work and through the rest of the FAN over the last 5 or 6 years, certainly.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a tendency to romanticize like what cinema was before, and it was amazing that we could all sit in a space and share a screen together, but it still had a lot of problems. It was still not always accessible for a lot of people, and I think what we can go towards is something better, not build back what we had, but have something more inclusive that brings in all of that learning, like you just said. I think that would be really valuable.
Well, that's a goal to work towards. Toki, thank you very much for your time today.
That's okay. Thanks for chatting to me.
See you. No, it's great. And for FAN members who are listening, can give you a shout if they have any queries, can they?
Of course they can, yeah. So you can get me at toki@filmhubwales.org, and I'm on Twitter as @Toki_Allison with 2 L's. That's me. You can stick any details in the podcast description stuff if that's useful as well.
Yep, I will do that.
We'll do all that. Well, look, thanks, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, take care.
Thanks, Toki. Bye.